In Cameroon's high green hills, the land feels ancient and peaceful. Forests stretch over ridgelines. Villages sit in valleys where mornings usually arrive with birdsong, smoke from cooking fires, and the soft noise of life beginning again. Lake Nyos lies in a volcanic crater, like a dark, still mirror. Quiet water, calm shore, nothing that looks like danger. And then comes one night in 1986, when an entire valley falls silent without a storm, without flames, without a sound loud enough to warn anyone. By morning, people are left with only one question: what was in the air? At dawn, the first thing you notice is what you don't hear. No insects, no birds, no goats calling out. The silence feels heavier than normal, like it's pressing down on the grass itself. Then you see shapes scattered across the hillside, animals lying still, as if sleep simply never ended. There's no blood, no obvious injuries, no signs of a struggle, just bodies placed in the landscape like abandoned props. In the villages below, the stillness gets worse. Doors are open, cooking fires are cold. People are found exactly where they were the night before, near thresholds, beside hearths, mid-routine. It looks like time stopped. Like something moved through the valley and switched life off. The day before had been ordinary, the kind of day no one remembers because nothing went wrong. Water was collected, food was cooked, children played. Lake Nyos reflected the sky like any other lake. If you'd been there that evening, you might have thought the stories were exaggerated. Local warnings turned into bedtime tales. Because long before scientists arrived with instruments and theories, people here treated certain lakes differently. Not just as water, but as maleficent water. Places tied to spirits, ancestors and forces that punish disrespect. Elders spoke of angry entities living in the crater. Some believed the lake could rise, sink, or explode if disturbed. Others told stories about a white mist that could creep out at night and put people to sleep. To outsiders, it sounded like superstition. To locals, it sounded like memory. Something learned the hard way, then carried forward in story form. There was another tradition too. Simple, practical, and strangely wise. Live on high ground. Build where wind moves, sleep where air doesn't pool. Over time, as more families settled closer to fertile land and water access, new homes appeared lower in the valley. The old warnings became easy to ignore. That's how it often happens. Danger doesn't disappear. People just get used to living beside it. Even the name Nyos carries a shadow in local telling. Some say it's linked to a meaning like to crush, as if the lake was named for what it can do when it turns. Whether that translation is exact or symbolic, the feeling behind it fits. This is a place people learned to respect before they could explain it. Because Lake Nyos is not a normal lake. It is a volcanic crater lake. Beneath it, deep underground, gases can seep upward through fractures in rock. One of the most important is carbon dioxide, CO2. CO2 is invisible, odorless, silent, and under pressure it dissolves easily into deep water, like gas dissolves into a sealed bottle of soda. Lake Nyos is deep and often stratified, meaning its water layers don't mix freely. Warm surface water can shift with wind and weather, but deep water can stay cold, heavy, and trapped for years. That deep layer becomes a storage chamber, slowly loading itself with dissolved CO2. For a long time, the lake can look perfectly calm. That's the trap. The danger is not on the surface. It's stored below. Scientists have a name for what happens when that storage suddenly fails. A limnic eruption. It's rare, but terrifying, because it doesn't arrive like fire or flood. It arrives like physics. On the night of August 21st, 1986, something disturbed the deep layers of Lake Nyos. The exact trigger is still debated. Possibly a landslide, a small seismic event, or a sudden mixing of layers. But the mechanism is understood. Deep, gas-rich water rose, pressure dropped. CO2 came out of solution in a violent rush. As bubbles formed, they expanded and forced more water upward. More pressure fell, more gas escaped. The process accelerated into a chain reaction. The lake effectively exhaled an enormous volume of CO2 in a short time. And then the valley's shape did the rest. Because CO2 is heavier than air, it doesn't float up and vanish. It pours downhill. It hugs the ground. It flows into depressions and low places like an invisible liquid, filling the valley floor first, moving along paths, into homes, into animal pens, into any space where air normally sits waiting to be breathed. This is what makes it so frightening. CO2 doesn't need to be poison, to be deadly. It can simply replace oxygen. You can still inhale, but the air no longer contains what your body needs. Breathing becomes useless. People asleep didn't wake up in time. There was no smell to fear, no smoke to see, no roar to run from. The threat had no face. It only had gravity. In the aftermath, survivors described experiences that felt unreal. Some people didn't wake immediately the next morning. They regained consciousness hours later, disoriented, weak, as if they had been trapped inside a heavy dream. They opened their eyes and found the world changed. Families gone, neighbors silent, animals motionless on the hills. There were also small details that made the event feel like something supernatural. Lamps that wouldn't stay lit, even with oil still inside. Flames that flickered and failed. The reason was simple and brutal. Fire needs oxygen too. In places where CO2 pooled thickly, even a flame couldn't breathe. And the legends returned instantly, because the disaster matched the shape of the old stories. The white mist that puts people to sleep. The warning to stay on high ground. The belief that the lake held a force that could judge you. In the first chaotic hours, people searched for explanations that fit what they could see. Some feared a curse. Others feared poison. Some thought there had been an attack. But there were no obvious wounds, no smoke, no chemical smell, just silence and confusion. When scientific teams arrived, they brought instruments to measure what humans can't sense. They tested the air. They studied the lake's layers. They analyzed water chemistry. And they found the invisible culprit. A massive release of CO2 from the lake's depths. The discovery was horrifying for another reason too. Because it meant the lake could do it again. As long as CO2 continued seeping up from underground, Lake Nyos could recharge. The deep water could slowly build pressure again. The bottle could fill again. So the response became engineering. Degassing pipes were installed, long vertical systems that draw deep, gas-rich water upward, so CO2 can vent in controlled, steady amounts instead of catastrophically. The goal is simple: prevent the deep layers from ever storing enough gas to exhale all at once again. It's not a dramatic victory. It's a managed truce, a decision to live near a dangerous system by constantly releasing its pressure before it builds. People also changed how they live around the lake. Risk zones were mapped, warnings were issued. In some places, relocation became part of survival. The oldest advice, high ground, returned, now backed by measurements instead of myth. Even the lake itself seemed altered after the event. When deep water rises rapidly, it can bring mineral-rich layers to the surface. Iron can oxidize. Color and clarity can shift. A lake that looked clean before can become murky afterward, like the crater is showing the aftermath on its skin. And yet, the most unsettling part is how normal it can look today. The hills are still green. The crater is still beautiful. The water can sit perfectly still under a bright sky. If you didn't know the story, you might call it peaceful. That's the warning Lake Nyos leaves behind. The most dangerous disasters are not always loud. Sometimes the threat is invisible. Sometimes it's odorless. Sometimes it moves like a mist and feels like nothing at all. Until breathing becomes impossible. Because the Earth doesn't always attack with earthquakes and volcanoes you can see. Sometimes it releases something you can't. Sometimes the planet exhales, and the air becomes the weapon. If you want more cinematic documentary stories like this, where myth meets science and nature feels like a living force, like the video and subscribe. Off the Map goes where the map ends, and where the quietest places hide the darkest truths. And next, blood falls. In Antarctica's white silence, a waterfall runs red down the ice like a wound that never closes. Is it life trapped beneath a glacier? Ancient chemistry? Or something far older still? Next episode, Blood Falls.